Will came to me about, let's see, a couple months ago and said, I got a story to tell you. And he talked to Lance Gibson, he talked to Jonathan Brown, and well, raise your hand if Will has talked to you before. Look around the room. See, look at that. Say, this man has been around, okay? And he said, I'm interested in starting a club. And I said, really, what? He said, it's called the Suicide Prevention Club. I said, wow. So that's what we're starting in. This was kind of the first kickoff. We started a little bit last quarter, and we got a few people, but we'll talk a little more about when we're going to have our next meeting, and it'll be before this year is out, and then we'll continue it again next year. But what you just heard is a powerful story, a story that you may never really have had a chance to listen to before. Someone who came that close, someone who wanted, okay? So we're here today to not only listen to his story, but to really ask ourselves, you know, who am I, and what kind of person am I, and what kind of life am I living, and what if someone came to me and mentioned some of those clues, some of those indicators that might have said, maybe this person is thinking about ending their life. And Will told you part of the story, that he went to a friend and said, you know, goodbye, I'm never going to see you again. And I know those friends, as soon as they heard that he had hurt himself and that he was maybe on the brink of death, realized, oh my goodness, maybe there's something I could have done about this. So that's what I'm going to talk about for a little bit today. As some of you know, I teach a class, a one-credit class called Suicide Intervention, which we offer once a quarter. I've only brought 40 of these, so if some of you can share this with the people next to you, and can you pass those around? Maybe get 3 or 4 to every table. Okay, that would be great. And basically, this is just a list of suggestions and clues and so on. I'm also a member of an organization called the American Association of Suicidology, and they do a lot of research on suicide intervention and prevention and so on. But the suicide class is a one-credit class that meets for 2 days, and we just had our class a couple weeks ago, and we're going to have it again in fall quarter. So what I've done for you, because I'm not going to go through all this in a lot of detail, is just kind of give you what I consider the briefest overview that I can of issues relating to suicide. What are some clues, some risk factors that might indicate to you something's going on with this person, and then what are some things that you can do that might help someone out here. Let's see, let me grab this one if you want to work on with her, and let's see. So here's some clues here, okay? Depression. Depression is one of the main features that may lead people to suicide. And a little formula that I give for depression is called D equals S times P, okay? And it's a way of thinking about depression. So here's the D, S times P. And so think of depression as a form of sadness times pessimism. And so what does that mean? Well, we've all been sad before, but it's the belief that things will never get better. So as horrible as I feel now, I believe I'm going to feel just as lousy tomorrow, or in fact, maybe even what? Worse, right? And so I'm sure that's where Will was. That why should I live another day and another day? Because it's just all going to be the same, or even it's going to get worse. So a key feature of this word is the word hopelessness, because that's what many depressed people feel. And then a little metaphor that I want to give is, think about this room being your life. And everywhere you go in this room is painful. Physically painful, emotionally painful. And so what do you do when you're in a room of pain? What you try to do is try to alleviate it in some way. Your brain doesn't like pain. And so you try different things. You get under this table and that doesn't work. You stand on that table, that doesn't work. You go over to that corner, you go under that table. You know, you try everything you can, and day after day after day, you realize this doesn't work. And what begins to happen is you start thinking about that door. And that door becomes your method. And so the person starts thinking about, yes, as much pain as I'm in, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave. And that becomes their method. For Will, it was a car. For other people, it's a rope, a gun, pills, jumping, or whatever. they did some interesting research. About 20 years ago, I attended a meeting for the American Association of Suicidology, and it was in San Francisco, and one of the workshops was called the Golden Gate Bridge Workshop. And we jumped on a bus and went to the Golden Gate Bridge, and at that point, 20 years ago, more than 1,000 people had jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. And they had done some follow-up, because out of those 1,000 people, there were some people who survived. Out of those 11, they interviewed all 11 of them. One woman went back 3 months later and jumped off again. The other 10, like Will, were so glad and grateful that they had survived. And when they ask people who jump out of a building or off a bridge or whatever, those who survived, and they say, what were you thinking when you were on your way down? For many people, they don't remember anything. But those who do remember something, the most common thought is, oh my God, I made a mistake. And Will got another chance. But there are thousands of people every year who make a suicide attempt, who attempt to go out that door and wish that they had a second chance. So we're fortunate to have someone who can, walk and talk and tell us a very tough story, and he's still living, a tough injury. I've dealt with people who've experienced traumatic brain injury before, and it's a challenge, short-term memory issues and all those kinds of things that come up, okay? So that's why depression is listed first on here. Then they see the others. When you hear people say things like, number 2, I won't be around anymore, I just can't take it anymore, I just can't go on, one of your best responses is to say, what's going on? And then do something that every good listener does. Shut up. And just listen. That's your job. Because they're in pain. And their job is, your job is to listen, to tell you about the room of pain that they're in. And to also realize you can't fix it. Our tendency is to find something where, okay, well, maybe if you try this, or how about this, or it's not so bad, or if you only believe in my religion, or God only gives you as much you can handle, and on and all these sort of cliches that for most people don't help, okay? And so it's your job when you start to see these clues, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but you see them listed there, is then to begin what's called suicide CPR, okay? So steps in intervention. When you suspect that a person is depressed and hopeless, and when you're detecting any of the clues, listen to the handout, find a location. And then on the other side as well, there's a list of clues that are a little acronym, little mnemonic device for you that gives some other indications that the person may be thinking about suicide. And they put it together as the first letter of each word, the acronym is path warn, okay? And so ideation means thinking, and then if they're using substance abuse, substance issues, and so on, all right? So back to the front page then. So the important thing is to practice on those words, are you thinking of suicide? Okay. And those get caught in our throat. It's scary stuff to ask someone about suicide, because what we think is, many of us have this fantasy, that if I ask someone about suicide, it'll go like this, well, gee, you've been depressed and you're dealing with all these issues? Gee, have you thought about killing yourself? Our fantasy goes like this. A person goes, no, but that's a good idea. Okay? Right? As if somehow you've put that idea into their head that wasn't there in the first place. This is a no-lose question. You cannot lose by asking that question. Right? Because either they say yes, and they breathe a sigh of relief, or they try to lie to you. How many of you have people close to you in your life that if they tried to lie to you about something like that, you would know that? How many of you know? And you wouldn't let go. You say, wait a minute, no, there's something going on here, right? Or, in some cases, maybe they're dealing with a lot of problems, but they're really not suicidal, so they'll say no, okay? So you ask, are you suicidal, okay? And then if they say yes, then number 2, you start what we can call suicide CPR, all right? Now, how many of you know regular CPR? Now, look around the room here. Raise your hand if you know CPR. Look around, okay? There's a little, I don't know if there's probably a mythology that the Seattle-Tacoma area has more people who know CPR than any place in the world. Okay? So the joke is that if you are walking down the street and you fall down, there will be people fighting over your body because they all know, she's mine. No, I know CPR. Me too, right? Okay? So what do we have here? We have the suicide CPR, which is a little different. Okay? And so you see the C stands for what? Current plan. Okay? So once this person has said yes and you've listened to some of their story, then ask, how are you thinking about doing it? How are you thinking about taking your life, and so on, all right? And that's scary, but the point is to find out where that is. And so if, Will were a friend of yours and he said, well, and you had enough guts to ask him that question, and he said, well, I'm thinking about my car. And you said, well, what about your car? And in many cases, people will tell you. 10 to 20% of people who die from suicide don't give any clues ahead of time, okay? And Will said he was a good actor and he was, trying to pretend like everything was okay. And for some people, they do that and they might do that, okay? But for other people, they'll tell you, this is what's going on. And then your job is to put distance between them and their method. If they have pills, can they give you the pills? But the point is that you don't do all this alone, okay? Then P is prior behavior. To ask someone if they've attempted suicide before. Does suicide run in families? Yes, to the extent that depression can run in families. And therefore, if Uncle Charlie died from suicide, well, maybe I'll do what Uncle Charlie did. So in that case, there's that factor. And then the most important thing, once you've listened to their story, you realize what their method is, then you ask, what about some resources? And so I've listed them there. Who else besides me can we talk to? Your brother. Now they may say things like, well, I don't want to bother my brother, Well, what I do is I turn them around and say, what if it was your brother that was hurting in this case? Would you want to know that your brother, well, yes, all right. Well, it sounds like your brother needs to hear what's going on. He needs to hear how serious this is. He needs to have you say the word suicide so he knows this is really serious. Well, who else can we talk to? How about your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle? Oh, I hate my uncle. Okay, we're not going to call him, right? Okay. And it's, finding ways that you're not going to do it on your own. Sometimes, especially, how many of you plan to get into the healthcare profession where you're helping people either physically, psychologically, or whatever? Okay, right? Sometimes early on when you get into it, and you're helping someone else, you may come to believe that you are the only one in the world who could help this person out. Okay? Don't fall into that trap. Don't do this alone. Okay? You need to get other people involved. Why is this? Because you may help that person today and they may think you're the only person and you may think that too, and then something that happens to you tonight. And then guess what? The only person that can help them is gone. So don't do this alone. There's a national suicide hotline number as well. If the person is a college student, every college in the country has a counseling center. A lot of students don't really understand what the counseling center does. They think it's for educational advising and so on, which certainly they can help with. But the counseling center is on campus to help students with the problems that they're having in their life. And guess what? The problems that you have at home, quite often you bring to school. It's interfering with your ability to be a good student. So the counseling center is, upstairs in the registration office, upstairs in building 6. If you have a friend who's indicating some sort of issues going on with their life, you take them to counseling at the center and say, we got someone here. And you can say to the person who works at the desk, listen, we need someone right away to talk to this person. Okay? If they can wait a few days, that's fine. But the important thing is, say, here's what's happening. Then number 3, the worst thing that you can do is dare a person, right? Think about when you were younger and you did something and the teacher said, why did you do that? Well, he dared me, right? My teacher used to say to me, well, Bobby, if he jumped off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge? I go, yes, I would, as a matter of fact, right? Okay. We do things because people dare us, so don't dare someone, who's suicidal. We hear things like, someone's got a gun, and we say, Sylvia, you don't have the ovaries to pull that trigger, right? Okay. And guess what? Boom, she shoots the gun. All right, so consider the following as we're finishing up here. Find ways to immediately put distance between the person and their method. Be a good listener. For those of you who are interested, if you really want to, I have actually a YouTube presentation that is on good listening. And so there's like 5 different segments to it on how to be a good listener. And I talk a little bit about suicide in there. So for those of you who are interested, and my students will get a 1-point bonus for doing it. So here they are.
All 5 or 1 each?
Oh, 1 each. No, just 1. 1 point. Okay, and then suicidal thoughts and behaviors are serious. Don't do it alone, get help. And then last, don't leave this person until an agreement has been made in which the person has promised not to use their method and you've gotten additional help. All right? Okay, did you learn something about suicide today? All right, good. Thank you.